Netflix released the Hulk Hogan documentary. It's 4 parts. The first one was called The Rise, which starts off at Terry Bollea's funeral. We see a coffin being wheeled out in an auditorium, and we saw several wrestling personalities present at the funeral, including Brutus Beefcake, Ric Flair, Jimmy Hart, Kevin Nash, Big Show, X Pac, and Dennis Rodman, all shown at the funeral. That's who I saw at least. And this was his final interview. We see him working out in his gym to start, and then we got a montage of his career with AC/DC's It's a Long Road to the Top if you want to rock and roll, which is perfect for the 80s. And then you can see him sitting down, which hurts him. And that tells you the guy was in a lot of pain before he passed away. We meet Linda Hogan, who is all over this documentary, by the way. She was Hulk's first wife. She's we hear from the third wife later on, but we never hear from the second wife during the documentary. But we get a lot of Linda on this one. And then we go through his childhood when he watched championship wrestling from Florida. Then we touch on his musical career. That's how he kind of got into the wrestling business, when he started mingling with wrestlers who were fans of his music, and he had a great look and they wanted to recruit him into the business. He finds out wrestling isn't real. He trained with B. Brian Blair, who was one of his closest friends. They talk about the territories. First, he was the Super Destroyer, then he was Terry Boulder. Again, I like how this version of Hulk Hogan, the rock and roll Hulk Hogan, the Eye of the Tiger by Survivor, their song Hulk Hogan, which was in Rocky 3, it just feels different from like the real American gimmick he adopted when he went to the WWF, and later on when he took the Rick Derringer song Real American. I just feel like the Eye of the Tiger Hogan is just more rock and roll, more 80s, more cool, and it's kind of interesting to see this version of Hogan, which we never really see, especially like in WWE stuff like that. This older version of Hogan, I just find it to be more cool and fascinating, and in some ways it led to the formation of the Hollywood character. It predated it in many ways, to be honest. Then we meet Jimmy Hart, who Hogan's real life manager. We all know they were very close. We also met Jerry the King Lawler, who was struggling to speak. He was on this documentary very briefly. He would have talked more. He was a close friend of Hogan, but Jerry had the stroke, and it's hard for him to really complete a sentence without him slurring his words. Then we meet Bret Hart. Obviously, does not like Hulk Hogan. They tell us stuff we already know, like Hogan. He got the Hulk name from the Incredible Hulk, the Marvel character who had a TV show, and Hogan looked like him. Hulk Hogan looked like him because he had such a physique, so he became Hulk. And then he goes on to I think they called him the Hulk, and then later Vince McMahon Sr. gave him the name Hogan because it was like an Irish name, so it became Hulk Hogan. Then he goes to New York to work for Vince McMahon Sr., and he gets the name Hulk Hogan. As I said, his first match in Madison Square Garden was against Ted DiBiase, and Hogan was a great heel. He really was. You can see him here. It's like you can see how this led to Hollywood Hogan. He always had that in him. Then comes Rocky 3. He gets fired from the WWF over it. And then they show him on the Johnny Carson show. Then they show him when he first met Linda, his first wife. And by the way, I had to mention the soundtrack they were using in the first episode was very 80s. A lot of memorable 80s songs. And it fit well. It just fit with the atmosphere and the setting and the time period. I thought it worked really well with it. Now he goes to the AWA to work for Vern Gagne. Then he met Jesse Ventura there. He turns face. He cites Dusty Rhodes as his inspiration there. He becomes the biggest star in wrestling. And Hogan mentioned how the two territories everyone wanted to go to were New York, which is the Northeast, and Minnesota, AWA, which is the Midwest. So you have WWF, AWA are like the two biggest territories. I don't believe either of them were part of the NWA, because I forget AWA and NWA had a weird relationship where they were separate from most of it. AWA was they weren't part of the NWA for a long period of time, as was the WWF. They were kind of in and out. So those were two major territories to go to. and he goes back to WWF, now under Vince McMahon Jr., who tells him he can make him the biggest star in the history of the wrestling business, which he went on to do. Now we go to the part 2, which is called Hulkamania. It starts off when Hogan Terry Bollea proposes to Linda, and they get married, and we saw footage from their wedding. Now we go to him winning the championship at Madison Square Garden. His parents watch him win the WWF championship from the Iron Sheik. And then we go to the first WrestleMania. They show Bruce Pritchard on the documentary. And then they got some guy named Greenberg because they didn't want Dave Meltzer there because WWE probably just didn't want him on the documentary. Don't blame him. Who wants to hear from Dave? He's such an idiot. But he's not an idiot. He's just a clown, Dave Meltzer. But this Greenberg guy, can you do better than him? I've never heard of this fucking guy in my life. Greenberg? Who the fuck is this guy? Anyways, Mr. T would team up with Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania. They hosted Saturday Night Live the night before. He chokes out the TV host, Richard Belzer, which is hilarious. Like, he puts him in a guillotine lock. He accidentally chokes him out, and the back of his head hits the floor, and he's bleeding. I mean, the guy was, like, shitting all over wrestling, so I found it kind of funny. And kind of, I guess kind of ironic. He thinks wrestling's all bullshit. Well, the back of his head doesn't think so. He was bleeding. Maybe Hogan should have just done the David Schultz thing and just slapped the guy for insulting the business instead of actually choking him out and almost killing the guy. Then we see fans outside of Madison Square Garden for the first ever WrestleMania. It included Liberace, Muhammad Ali, Cyndi Lauper, and Andy Warhol as the celebrities at the event, as I forgot to mention. And then they show montage of the first main event. They briefly show footage of the second WrestleMania as they go through the year. And then they also had Jake Roberts on this documentary, by the way. Then they show Hogan reuniting with his brother Alan, the older brother. He had a lot of drug issues. And then Alan would pass away shortly thereafter. I think the story is Hogan just gave him, he lended him money because he needed it. And then he died. And Hogan just wishes he took him with him to the show and got him help. And Hogan actually cut the interview short, which was kind of surprising. It's one of the first times really where he says, no, I'm not talking about this anymore. And you can tell it really did hurt him. Cody Rhodes was also on the documentary. Now we get to WrestleMania 3, the biggest wrestling match of all time. Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. Yeah, it was included in the Hall of Fame this year. Now I know why, because of this documentary to coincide with it. It would have made more sense to save it for next year because it would have been the 40-year anniversary since WrestleMania 3. So 40 years later, you put it in the immortal moment, 40-year legacy. But they did it 39 years, I think, more so to coincide with the Hulk Hogan documentary that WWE was involved in and they wanted to promote for Netflix. So that's why I think they inducted it this year. And I just thought it would have made more sense to wait till next year for it to be the 40th anniversary. So we have the height of Hulkamania, which really, I think, from what I've heard, I've always read the stuff I've read it. The WWE's business boom or WWF's business boom was before WrestleMania 3. Yes, WrestleMania 3 was the massive show, was a huge success, Hogan and Andre, but 85, 86 was more so when they were at their top. But yeah, the WrestleMania 3, it's the height of Hulk. It's the peak of that era in a way. It really is. Even if you can say business wasn't, a single night for popularity, and it's such a memorable classic event. WrestleMania 3 was, with Hogan slamming him in the main event. It's the biggest match in all of wrestling. In the history of wrestling, it's the biggest match still. Then he has a child, Brooke, and he has a second child, Nick. We see his kids, footage of them. Natalia was also on the documentary. And we saw some Hogan family videos, which I think the first time it's ever been aired. And they're personal. I think Linda or someone had them, and they just let them use it on the documentary. What annoyed me about this is they were talking about the Ultimate Warrior, and they just trashed the guy. Hogan just takes a shot at Warrior, and I'm thinking, all right, this is just a self-destruction DVD all over again. If Warrior was still alive, there would have been another lawsuit. And all I thought was, man, if Kevin Castle was alive from the Don Cherry and Kevin Castle show, he would have gone on an insane rant on this. he always defended the Ultimate Warrior like crazy. He loved Warrior, and like he would be all over them right now. He'd be trashing Hogan, and the stuff Hogan is saying here that Warrior wanted to go home in 3 minutes is fucking bullshit. It's the same bullshit that Hulk Hogan has told for years. He sells the same fucking lies because no one's gonna check him on it, and Warrior can't defend himself, and no one likes Warrior, which, you know, it might be Warrior's fault due to his personality, but still, like, he's talking about having Warrior in a chin lock, and they're showing footage like 3 minutes into the match. No, you can see the paint off of Warrior's face that's well later into the match. It's just bullshit. And the fact that they needed to just bury the guy, it feels like to me, once Dana Warrior was no longer with WWE, it's the chance for all these guys who don't like Warrior to like pile on and start shitting on him again and criticizing him, like, you know, DiBiase and just guys who didn't like him. And, you know, it's just, they show him porting over Warrior, which he doesn't. He fucking kicks out of 4 because Hogan didn't want to lose. Because, you know, he was just politicking. It's what he fucking did his whole career. Hogan's a fucking liar. Everyone knows it. Yeah, the guy's dead. He's a legend. He's the biggest wrestling star in the history of the business. He was a fucking liar. He lied about so much shit. He played politics all the time. Everyone knows this is just Hogan being Hogan now. That really fucking annoyed me. I just rolled my eyes back of my head. Here we go. And by the way, Randy Savage was barely mentioned in this documentary, which is weird. Yeah, anyway, it's a total burial of Warrior. It's like, fuck off, WWE. Just, I hope you get another lawsuit on your hands. You deserve another one for your the fucking that infamous self-destruction DVD. And then they go back to Hogan as champion after WrestleMania 7, which, you know, I find funny. I also wanted to mention that he tells Vince that he needs to step down because of his family and he wants to take time off, so that's why they built up the Warrior. No, the business was going down. Even in the late 80s, by 1990, the business was down. WrestleMania 5 against Randy Savage was a huge success, yes, but compared to their, you look at their business from like 87, 85 to 87, 84 to 87, the peak of like really where Hulkamania was, the time when he wins a belt to WrestleMania 3, it was going down the next 2 years. And, you know, Savage was, you know, featured more in 88 than Hogan was. Hogan wasn't around a lot. And then, you know, by 90, business is down. In 91, business sucked. Anyway, I just find it funny. It's bullshit. He's just a liar. It's what he always was his whole life, and especially the last 25 years, just lying about shit all the time. Anyway, we go to part 3, Hollywood Hogan. So we meet Eric Bischoff. Jesse Ventura had a funny line on Hogan about the vitamins because that's when they talk about the steroid trial. And Hogan is just a liar, just fucking going on Arsenio Hall and saying he never did steroids. What a fraud. Anyway, they show footage of Brutus Beefcake and Randy Savage working out with Hogan. And of course, he takes another shot at Warrior. Then as I mentioned, they went into the Arsenio Hall stuff with the fucking lies. He admits he lied. And then he moves away from wrestling due to the steroid investigation. And then we go to Bret as champion in 92 to 93. Hogan would return to the WWF in 93. This is when he plays backstage politics. Everyone knows he booked himself to beat Yokozuna at WrestleMania 9 to win the belt. And they actually played the Red Right Hand song from the Scream movies. You have to be a fan of Scream to know what that song was, to play up the Hogan-Bret feud, which was actually pretty fitting in a way. But I don't know if I kind of marked out in a way because I've always liked the Scream movies, and actually to hear Red Right Hand was pretty cool here. But they cover Hogan and Bret's feud. Bret tells him to fuck off. Of course he would. He says fuck you, and, you know, it's like, yeah, I mean, it messed with Bret. It messed with his push after Hogan wouldn't put him over, and he pulled the shit. Hogan didn't have to put him over. Just don't pull that shit at WrestleMania 9. Do your fucking tag match and go away. Fine. He doesn't have to put Bret over. That's fine. Just like for him to do that shit. And then they never talked about the SummerSlam shoot they did together that was in the magazine and the match didn't happen. It's just annoying. But yeah, I understand why Bret is mad. It's like, but at the same time, like, you can't lie. The fans at WrestleMania 9 in Las Vegas, they loved it when Hogan won the belt back. Look back at that WrestleMania 9 documentary, Becoming a Spectacle. The fans loved it. Triple H was on the documentary. He talked about how Hogan wasn't drawing anymore. Hulk and Vince have a falling out. Now he goes into Hollywood. They show the classic Gremlins 2 scene, which is awesome. I love that they did that in the theater. That was actually really cool. But Hogan was a flop in Hollywood. Suburban Commando, I believe, was the movie. It was a flop. The Santa with Muscles is stupid. There's that infamous scene when he's in a skirt in some movie. Didn't work out. He goes to WCW. They show kind of WCW before Hogan went there. They show RoboCop, and they're making it like it's the biggest piece of shit territory, which it really wasn't. Yeah, they needed Hogan for sure. And they showed the Disney parade when he signs with WCW. Now we go to the steroid trial. He defends Vince McMahon. There was still a lot of personal animosity. Vince was taking shots at him afterwards because Vince was pissed off Hogan went to WCW. Then we get Flair and Hogan at Bash at the Beach when Hogan's first match in WCW's first pay-per-view. Fans begin to turn on him. Now we get to the NWO. Kevin Nash was on the documentary. We get to hear briefly about the Outsider stuff we've heard a million fucking times. We go to Bash at the Beach 96, the greatest heel turn of all time. NWO montage. Then we go to the Monday Night War. They talk about the finger poke of doom. Like, they recap everything too fast. They didn't talk about Starrcade 97, the fucking disaster. They didn't talk about the stuff with Hogan not putting talent over. Like, we all know this shit in WCW was worse than WWF. They never touch on that. But then they show Vince Russo and Hogan's just burying Russo. They showed the Bash at the Beach 2000 footage. It's like really brief. Russo was not on this documentary either. Then WCW is purchased by Vince McMahon in 2001. Vince wanted him to come home. They have Rock and Hogan at WrestleMania 18. An incredible match. I love it. I remember watching it as a kid. All-time classic match. Such an iconic wrestling match, you know. Not as I mean like a great wrestling contest. A great match in terms of getting fan involvement. It's so much fun watching it just to see how passionate the fans are. And this is what I think wrestling, professional wrestling in the WWF really should be. It's all about being over. It's all about your gimmick, your charisma, your character, and you know the actual moves in the ring are kind of secondary, but it's still like it's an emotional match. People are totally invested in it. It's not like they don't care about the actual match. They do, and it's like they didn't need to do a lot. It's just the people were so into it. Everything they did, they went crazy. Especially whenever Hogan did anything, the fans just went nuts. He was so freaking over. And then they showed the standing ovation he got in Montreal. And I was thinking, man, it must have really messed with him for his final appearance in Los Angeles to be what it was, which we'll talk about. Especially when you get an ovation like that, and like it had to mess with his head. It had to, but that standing ovation, I remember it too. After WrestleMania 18 in Montreal, the fans just loved Hulk Hogan. Man, he was so over. And then they would eventually put the belt on him. And there's a dark part here when he says he would change the end to WrestleMania 18. And that's dark because like he's at his peak, he's the most beloved, and if he went out like that and like he tragically passed away or something after that match, soon after that, like he would be like the ultimate legend. Everyone would love him, everyone would revere him. But then you know the last 23 years or so happened, and definitely changes the perception of Hulk Hogan and Terry Bollea. But we go to part 4, which is really what we're all waiting for. Everyone, like the first 3 parts are nothing that you haven't heard before. But part 4, it's called Hulk versus Terry. It's a controversial episode, just like the Vince McMahon one was, with the last one being with all the controversy. So they show Triple H saying he didn't want Vince to put the title belt on Hogan in 2002, which I find funny because he happened to be champion after WrestleMania 18. Maybe he didn't want to drop it to Hulk Hogan. Another guy known for playing backstage politics backstage was Triple H. Maybe he just didn't want to lose to Hogan, which he didn't. They show WrestleMania 19, the match against Vince, and then they talk about all the back injuries. They briefly go over Hulk Hogan and Shawn Michaels at SummerSlam 2005. Shawn flopping everywhere like an idiot. And, you know, the main reason Shawn did that, I'm not saying it was good that he did that, was they were supposed to have a trilogy, and Hogan nixed the trilogy. So then, like, Shawn went out there and embarrassed Hogan in response. Now we go into Hogan Knows Best, the reality show. It was done to launch Brooks' music career, which never took off. Nick admits that they had him pull fake stunts, and Hogan's marriage ends up falling apart. There was this weird interview on Howard Stern where Howard Stern is talking about his parents getting a divorce. Hogan's kids are like, he's talking to Brooke and Nick about their parents getting a divorce, while Hulk and Linda are literally right beside him. That's so fucking awkward. And then Hogan slept with one of Brooke's friends. He claims she was a chaperone to Brooke, so she was probably older. Brooke Hogan did an interview with Bubba the Love Sponge, who, by the way, was nowhere on this documentary. Neither was Brooke. They didn't get either of them. Their WWE probably just didn't want them. But in which Brooke said, Hulk Terry would cheat on Linda all the time. So there were so many affairs, but that was just one of them. Hogan said he came home to an empty house. Linda took out all the safes. She took all his clothes. Everything was gone. And probably that's what happens when divorces. Things get really ugly. Linda had a much younger boyfriend. He was one of her kids' friends, which it's ironic to me that she claims that she never knew his age. She thought he was 25 and he was really 19. No, that's bullshit. She had to know he was that young because he went the same class as Brooke or Nick or something. So whatever. Linda was trying to humiliate Terry, and we hear some really bad stories about Terry having to get an apartment because the judge wouldn't let him live in his house or the beach house. So he had to get an apartment which that he would see everything, that he would be right next to. So he buys an apartment, a room. And then Linda would go with the boyfriend, and they would take Hogan's boat and Terry's boat, and they would make out, so he would have to watch. It's what the fuck? What a fucking cunt Linda is. And I know Hogan, he was a dick too. He was a piece of shit with all of his affairs and all the stuff he did. But holy shit, what a cunt! What a bitch Linda Hogan is. And Hogan's, he said there was this infamous interview he did in 09 where he says he understands O.J. Simpson. Kind of was taken out of context in a way, but he sees why he did it. With the stuff Linda was doing, yeah, I can see why his mind went there. He says he was suicidal. He had a gun in his mouth. He lost 70% to Linda in the divorce. He just wanted it to end, and he had no money. He was broke. That's well known. That's why he went to TNA. Bischoff set it up for him. Hogan had surgeries. It began to mount up. He now had a battery pack simulator, and they show him trying to wrestle in TNA. It's kind of embarrassing. It really is embarrassing. He can only bleed. It's awful. That period of TNA sucked with Hogan and Flair, and that was just an awful period for TNA. And then the sex tape was the next topic. They have the Hogan against Gawker lawsuit. We hear his attorney next. Hogan wins a $140 million lawsuit, but there's definitely a cost to that because in 2015, it leads to the racial tapes being late. The racist statements Hogan made in the sex tape, and it got revealed. It got leaked, and then he apologized for it. They did show him apologize, so people think he never apologized. He did, but they really don't go into detail of all the horrible stuff he said on the tape. And there was a jailhouse tape in which he said worse stuff regarding race, and there was also the stuff he would say about John Graziano, who was the Nick Hogan's friend that he put in a freaking coma after Nick Hogan was drunk, and they never touched that story. They don't touch any of the stuff with Nick. It's one thing if they don't want to talk too much about Brooke because she wasn't there, but Nick was interviewed and they didn't touch any of that stuff. So that was telling. And maybe they didn't want to talk about the jailhouse tapes because they were leaked, but still, they didn't even talk about that, the Nick Hogan stuff. And that was part of why he went broke. It wasn't just a divorce. All of Nick, Hogan has to pay for all his legal fees, and then the divorce on top of that. And there was Brooks' failed music career and the reality show flopping. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why he went broke. Then there was something really weird. So WWE releases Hogan in 2015, and then you have Triple H saying, I had to fire Hulk Hogan. I had to fire Terry Bollea. I didn't fire Hulk Hogan or something stupid like that. Idiot, you do know Vince McMahon fired Hulk Hogan. Vince McMahon fired Terry Bollea. It wasn't Triple H. McMahon was still running the company at that time. It's like, why would you even say I fired Hulk Hogan? That's so stupid. Anyway, they show Hogan meeting his third wife, Sky. They never mention his second wife. We don't even know who she is unless you research it. They totally skipped over Nick's accident, as I mentioned. Then they do the stuff, real American beer, brother. He gets booed at Raw on the debut. Okay, it's like I feel like I've heard people talking about this so much in the last year. He shouldn't have been on the show. Nobody wanted him there. The fans didn't want him there. I don't think most of the wrestlers wanted him there. It was just there because TKO signed an agreement with Real American Beer and they wanted to promote the beer, so they had Hogan there just to promote the fucking beer. Even though the fans clearly didn't want him there. And by the way, that was just such a shit show. Not with Hogan being booed by itself. It's like that Raw sucked. That Raw debut on Netflix. It's like, why? That's like the beginning of the ruthless depression era that we're in now of WWE. Anyway, Triple H says he thought he'd be booed. Then, like, don't book him, but maybe it was TKO's call. If you think he's going to get booed, why even book him if the fans really don't want to see him there? Anyway, he didn't get booed because of the politics or whatever. He got booed because of the racist tapes and stuff. They got leaked. And they nailed all the years of backstage politicking, which they really didn't touch too much on. They only talked about the stuff with Brett. They didn't talk about the stuff at Starrcade 97. There's a whole bunch of stories in which Hogan uses his backstage influence, especially in WCW. That doesn't work for me, brother. That's that line that's gone infamous in wrestling to wrestling fans. People know Hogan as a guy who would go into business for himself. He wouldn't put people over. That doesn't work for me, brother. Then there's the racist tapes. And there's also the years and years of just the fucking lies he told, which you never talked about here. There's so much bullshit he lied about. Then that does never even get mentioned. I mean, they don't talk about him saying that he could have been the lead singer of Metallica or something, which was bullshit. He was supposed to star as the wrestler instead of Mickey Rourke, which is bullshit. The infamous story about him like wrestling 400 times a year because of the time zone differences in Japan, or Andre dying a few months after the match at WrestleMania 3 when he died, and it died for like 6 years. Or there's the infamous Hulkster in Heaven story, which is pretty bad. There's just so many embarrassing lies about this guy, or that this guy is told over the years, and they never touched that. And I thought they could have gone more into that because it's kind of lighthearted in a way. It's kind of funny, but they never even touch all those lies he told. That's not even mentioned here. And then they never, the tall tales, they don't talk about it. And like his reaction to getting booed in Los Angeles, when he would talk about interviews, he would say it was because he was a heel as Hollywood Hogan, which is bullshit. And the other thing he would say is like he saw it, like he thought he could turn heel because of it. No, they weren't booing Hulk Hogan. They weren't booing your character. They're booing Terry Bollea because all the stuff you've done. And then he says he was the happiest when he was younger with his family and his young kids. And he gets up from the interview and he walks off. So that's kind of how it ended. He talks about what made him the most happy when he was younger, his family, Brooke and Nick when they were young, and he was still married to Linda. She was a mom, and he's on top of the world. He's Hulk Hogan. And he gets up from the interview, and that's the last time we hear from him. And then we go to his death, which was on July 24th, 2025. They show Kevin Nash, Eric Bischoff, others crying when they talk about Hogan dying. Then we went to WWE headquarters, and this was actually 4 hours after Hulk's passing. We saw Bruce Pritchard, who heard from Eric Bischoff in the morning that Hulk had a heart issue, and then Bruce called Paul Levesque, Triple H, and that's when Paul told him that Hulk died, and they show Bruce crying. He was shocked by it. Everyone was. They show Jim Duggan there. He was sad. Jesse Ventura said it was the end of his era when Hulk Hogan died. And I thought Jesse overall was very respectful to Hogan here, especially since I think this interview was done with Jesse after Hulk had already died. So he decided to kind of take the high road. They didn't mention the union stuff with Hogan ratting him out and stuff like that. Nick says there were complications after the neck surgery, and Sky, Hogan's wife, the widow now, says she wished they never did the neck surgery. That's really probably what killed him because he had complications from it. But there's a million surgeries he had on his back. That all took a toll on him. You can see it. The guy can't even, it hurts him to fucking sit. I mean, I don't think that's going to be someone who's going to be alive for very long. So you can tell, like, just the years and all those surgeries he had, and there's the steroid abuse. It's just there's so much on him. Like, and him also doesn't help that he's working out like a maniac still in the gym, and he's still huge. Yeah, I mean, this is surprising that he died like that. But yeah, I think they mentioned the leg drop. I mean, that's probably if it's a weird thing because if Hogan was saying he wishes he used a sleeper hold, the problem is the sleeper hold doesn't fit Hulk Hogan as like this giant superhero. Um, the leg drop did, and like maybe you could have found a better move, but the issue was without that leg drop, it's just it's just so iconic to Hogan. It's hard to imagine him using another finisher that would have worked as well. And but him doing the leg drop, he's such a big guy. It destroyed his back over so many years, and that's why he had all those surgeries. And no Brooke Hogan on this documentary. No Bubba the Love Sponge. They didn't mention a lot of more stuff they could have talked about, like Nick's issues. Then they go to SmackDown after Hulk's death. They show that Triple H was telling people that being on the stage wasn't mandatory. Almost everyone was. They showed Jimmy Hart on SmackDown. Brian Blair was there. He was emotional. Jimmy Hart, I thought, came off very well here, very sympathetic. Then they go to his funeral. You have final comments here. They show Jesse Ventura, as I said, he chose to be respectful. Triple H was at the funeral. They show him talking, and then they show Vince McMahon at the end, who leads the attendees in giving Hulk Hogan his final standing ovation as the documentary ends. Overall, I would say it's something you can watch. It's fine. I think if you're a casual fan, you'll get more enjoyment out of it. But if you're a hardcore fan, you know a lot of more of the controversies. And, the first 3 episodes aren't anything that you've ever heard about, that you've never heard about. Like, there's stuff you already know, and they're just sped up versions. They could have gone into a lot more. I thought they could have done another part at least. Maybe not 2, but at least another part. There's more they could have talked about, but also because the guy died, I thought it was much more friendly to Hogan, this documentary was, than the Vince McMahon, the Mr. McMahon documentary was that came out about a year and a half ago. But it's fine. You can watch it. It's on Netflix. It's called Hulk Hogan Real American, and it's 4 parts. I thought overall, I didn't like it that much, but it didn't bother me that much. There's just a lot more they could have talked about, and it's very brief. I wouldn't call it a complete like puff piece or necessarily like totally critical of him. Uh, it's just they could have done a lot more, I thought, but yeah, it is what it is. WWE helped produce it. That probably played a factor in it, but you can watch it. It's on Netflix. It's all on Netflix right now. You might have already seen it by watching WrestleMania because there were so many documentaries for it, but it was well done, and it's produced by Netflix. It's 4 parts, and watch the new Hulk Hogan documentary if you want.